Welcome everybody to this World Satsanga held on the 25th of May 2019, and actually it's being broadcast in Tokyo, Japan, and I'm going to meet some wonderful people who are associated with QHHT and who are also involved with the translation of first of all the history of God whilst I'm over here as well. So I'm delighted to be able to meet these people both again and for the first time. And thank you, Kevin Moore, again for transmitting the World Satsanga on his YouTube channel, the More Talk and the More Show. It's always a delight to be able to work with Kevin and his ability to reach further and farther with this particular modality of broadcasting. Thank you. Okay, so we've got quite a lot to do today in terms of questions, but the first thing I want to do is talk about what dementia is and how it's caused. There's a lot of people around me at the moment are experiencing, shall I say, dementia in terms of their parents or loved ones, for instance, and lots of them have asked the question of what it's all about. This includes things like Alzheimer's and the various different forms that dementia does come in. Well, basically, dementia in its worst case is very obvious, in so much as, from a spiritual perspective, the individual who we consider to be our loved one or our parent or our friend, whilst we're incarnating this particular incarnation, is no longer there. We don't feel their personality, we don't feel their spirit, so to speak. We just see somebody who is, or a body that communicates with us, and sometimes they focus on us and sometimes they don't. The worse, or should I say, the longer they've been experiencing dementia, the more difficulty they have in terms of understanding who we are and where we come from. Even if we're their children, for instance, it's most difficult, and including things like understanding and remembering things that happened 30 seconds or 3 or 4 minutes ago. Those individuals who experience dementia, in a limited sense, that being in terms of the longevity that the dementia has been with them, may operate quite normally, apparently, specifically to those who they don't see very often. So, for instance, if you are living away from your parents' home, and your parents are still living at home, or one of your parents is still living at home, and you have two parents still, and one parent is perfectly fine and the other parent has dementia, the parent who is perfectly fine will be saying that their partner is forgetful all the time, asks the same questions all the time, and has difficulty in remembering things, and is quite aggressive as a result of that. And then you as a child will come along once in a while, either you'll telephone them or you'll go and visit them, and they'll be perfectly compos mentis. They'll be totally focused, and that's because you do provide a focus. As an individual, you are not in part of the background. With the partner who's there all the time becomes part of the background, and so the things that or the levels of interaction with that partner start to become part of the background, and so non-consequential. So it doesn't create the focus for that individual. Whereas when you, as the child, comes along, you create a focus, and so therefore the person or the parent with dementia starts to remember things straight away, starts to understand who you are, what you're there for, and even down to conversations that you've had sort of 30-40 seconds ago. But the longer that you are there, you start to become more part of the background again, and then that's when things start to get repeated and they start to forget things. So what is this focus, and what is dementia? What is it all about? Well, it's all about really a way in which a particular aspect or soul has decided to leave the body. If you remember, there's a number of different termination junctures which we can have, up to 5, and the 5th one includes the final demise of the human form and the departure of the projected aspect from the true energetic self, which we sometimes call a Godhead or Oversoul or higher self, and the aspect being called a soul in an individualized unit of sentience and energy from the true energetic self, removes itself from that particular body, that vehicle that is experiencing this particular environment for a particular moment in space or time. And so that particular entity then sort of moves out, and the body dies. Now, with dementia, it's a case of there is a no longer a need to be incarnate. The expectations and the goals of the life plan have been, for all intents and purposes, completed, and therefore some souls either decide to go, they choose one of the departure, the termination junctures, or they finish their life plan close to the fifth termination juncture, and therefore the life plan is terminated at the same time. So they go all at the same time. But with dementia, the soul is sort of gradually moving out of the way. The aspect is sort of gradually departing, because he may have satisfied the goals or the requirements of its life plan, and may have decided to stay a bit longer, or may just be staying longer for those individuals who it's become associated with in this particular incarnation, such as its partner, such as its family members. And so there's a desire to go and go back to the energetic, but there's also a desire to stay. And so what happens is that the sentience that is associated with the particular incarnate human vehicle sort of gradually migrates slowly through like an underlying desire to go home, whereas on the other side of the fence we've still got this this issue about wanting to be here, wanting to stay incarnate. So you get this dichotomy where there's still a link with the human form, the incarnate human vehicle, but there's a desire from the aspect, the incarnate aspect or soul, to basically go back to the energetic and go back to its level of communion with its true energetic self. And so that's what happens. The soul doesn't need to be here, doesn't really want to be here, but feels an honour of duty, so to speak, to be here for those who are they feel are dependent upon them being there, for confidence reasons, for emotional reasons, and basically for creating that or maintaining that family unit reasons as well. So dementia is really, in a nutshell, the soul or the incarnate aspect gradually moving away from the incarnation, and rather than going in one go, either through a disease, illness, accident, or just the longevity of the vehicle, the human vehicle, just ending basically its function, finishing, breaking down, and no longer being functional. So it's really about understanding that the soul is departing slowly, and the focus is when we go and see a friend or a colleague or a parent or a partner that's got dementia, and we haven't seen them for some time. For instance, if they're in a care facility and we go, they suddenly wake up. So a part of the sentience comes back to meet us, comes back down the Hara line, that little energetic tube which maintains the connectivity between the incarnate aspect and the true energetic self. It comes down there and basically greets us, so to speak. It doesn't, from a human perspective, it doesn't feel that way, but from the soul or the aspect, it would say, "Oh, I've got to be here for them," so it would come back down again. And it's only when there's a period of existence experienced by that particular incarnate aspect has been achieved, for instance time, that individual starts to become part of the background, that they think, "Oh, well, they know I'm here now, so I can start to drift back." And that's when we start to lose the focus of the individual, and this sort of lack of personality, lack of understanding, the vacant look in the eyes of the individual with dementia starts to become prevalent as well. So dementia is really, again in summary, a condition where the soul has decided it wants to go, but feels some sort of honour of duty to hang around a bit longer for those individuals who expect them to be there, basically. And the result is that the sentience that is required to animate the human form and give it personality is not always there, and sometimes isn't there. And so you can see you can actually see a link between dementia and being in a coma, actually, because in the extreme cases of dementia, the body is just alive. From a human perspective, it's alive, although it's not really animated or interactive in a correct way, in a way that is applicable to and associated with a full level of connectivity from an aspect. And so you see people with dementia just sitting there, the vacant look on their faces. And this is almost the same as being in a coma, because actually, although in a coma, in general, comas can be can be contained or maintained by a very small percentage of sentience. In general, a lot of comas are maintained by medical and mechanical means, and so again you get this lack of connectivity there. And rather than having the eyes open with a vacant stare, which because there's nobody there, there's very little sentience there, the eyes are generally closed. So a coma and and dementia are almost identical in terms of what's going on. The soul, or the incarnate aspect, isn't in the body, or isn't in the body fully, so to speak. Okay, so when you see somebody with dementia, just recognise that they really aren't all there, because they're not. The sentience and the energy that is associated with that body is mostly gone. And you can give them the opportunity to go if you want to. You can give them the permission to go. So rather than perpetuating this condition where they're sort of sometimes here and sometimes not here, moving backwards and forwards between the body, which actually is something that we do anyway when we first associate ourselves with a human form in the fetus or in the embryonic state, for instance, and when the body is first born. And you know, we do the same thing, whether we're first born or whether we're in dementia state, we're about to leave the body. So we're backwards and forwards all the time. So really and truly, just give these people the permission to go. So when you see them with, you know, as a certain age, and it can be any age really, it can be from, you know, middle 40s or even late 30s up to 80s, 90s, and in the hundreds. If you see somebody that's got dementia and you know them, you can just say to them, you know, you don't need to hang around. You can go back to your true energetic self, or you can go back home if you want to use those words instead, and that will give them more incentive to go and detach the energy, the animating energy from the human form, removing it from the Tantien and the rest of the sentience from the soul seat, and bringing it back towards the core star, and then moving back up the Hara line back into communion with the true energetic self, and the body will demise accordingly. Okay, so if you see anybody with dementia, just recognise it's because their soul isn't fully integrated with the body, and it's probably finished its life plan and is feeling no reason to be here other than to provide consolation or confidence, or the need to be there for others who are part of the family unit. That's it. Okay, so that's what dementia is all about. It's about the soul leaving the body, but not quite leaving the body. Let's have a look at the questions we've got. We've got quite a lot of questions actually, so we've got lots to go through, lots to do. There's a lot from FM and a lot from JM today. Thank you very much for your questions. I'll try and get through them as swiftly as possible, because there's quite a lot here. The first question is, I understand that when we are born, let's say in Asia, and later in life we move to another continent, let's say America, it interferes with our life plan, or it interferes with our ability to excel or grow because different programming is required, i.e. culturally, language skills, etc. Is this true? If not, would that hinder our growth or abilities in our incarnated life, or is that part of our life planning? To move around the planet is sometimes part of the life plan, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's circumstantial, and sometimes it's an additional requirement that we've got if we've met the challenges, the goals associated with our life plan. So sometimes it can interfere with the life plan, sometimes it's additional to the life plan, and sometimes it's part of the life plan. So it's not really much of an issue. It's in terms of we need to deal with things as we deal with them. I mean, certainly my current partner's moved around the planet quite a lot. I've moved around the planet quite a lot, but not from a home perspective. And the location I'm in now is my second home. My first home was basically in one particular city for a long time. For most of my life, in effect, and where I am now is in a different city, on the same island, but in a different country within that island. If you want to understand that, so it's sort of dealing with things as it becomes appropriate, and recognising that some things, even though they might not be part of our life plan, may be added to the plan because we may have got to the point where we've dealt with most of the major aspects of that life plan or those goals. Okay, Next question is, in the AND dialogues you wrote from birth to 1 year, or year 1, also the chakras and the auric field are not entirely developed at this point in the incarnation, which results in the aspect having limited energetic functionality and personal protection from energetic attack of any kind. When others ask you about energetic attack, you disregard their existence by commenting that once we are energetically of a higher vibration, it should not matter. Okay, yeah. That still does not respond to the fact that it exists, and you are confirming that in your writing. What are they? What are these energetic attacks? Where do they come from? Who plans these attacks and for what purpose? Can I clarify their roots and purpose? How often do we need to clean, or what could we do for our protection when we are still working to reach higher vibrations and thus are prone or susceptible to such attacks? Well, energetic attacks come from everywhere. They can be from astral entities, which are either self-created through what you would call Darwinian evolution of energies, where similar or sympathetic energies group together, and they group together in clumps or islands of energies, and they sort of gradually gravitate towards other clumps or islands of similar or same energies, and then they start to have limited intelligence and actively seek those energies of the similar or same frequency or energy out as well, creating a much bigger energy and increasing the intelligence. To a certain point, though, they can achieve this, but sometimes they get to a point where they can't maintain their own energies, and therefore the intelligence sort of dissipates. And so to do that, they need to find an energy source, and we're a very good energy source, specifically if we're open. And so they find that they can get energy from us to perpetuate their own existence. And when this happens, there's sometimes a symbiotic relationship that happens. They give us feelings of power, ability to coerce people, or be successful in certain ways in a way that allows us to sort of justify giving them energy, so to speak. And we do this in a very sort of background way. We don't understand we're doing it from a human perspective, and so we sort of sometimes feed astral entities. So they want to come into us as soon as they can, because the younger we are, the less protected we are, and so the infant and the younger child will wants to be in the energies of the mother, because the mother's energy system and auric layers, which the auric layers are a byproduct of the energies that we use to create and animate the human form, but they're still quite protective from that perspective, a little like the atmosphere is on the earth, allows the baby to be protected by being inside the energies of the mother, so these entities can't attack them. Also, some of these entities are created by us not liking somebody or wishing somebody ill, and so we can inadvertently create these things by simply our desire or our intention or want to create or give somebody harm or ill thoughts. And this is enough to sort of create this opportunity for these energies to group together based upon the intention behind the individual who wants to create an ill thought process or wish somebody ill, so to speak, because they don't like them or because they've done something wrong to them. So the astral entities can be created by natural evolution, so to speak, and through us. But also, a lot of individuals throw energy at each other. If you go into an environment, for instance, where you feel the energy is not right and you walk out, that's because there's people who are throwing energy at each other. If you meet an individual who you find adversarial, you will find that their energy, you don't like being with them. They feel very nasty to you. Their energy feels sharp. That's because they're throwing energy at you. The energy can be like coercive energy, it can be sort of direct attacks like lightning, or it can be hooking energy, or it can be like sucking energy from you as well. So basically, energetic attacks come from human beings directly, human beings indirectly by using astral entities or other individuals to do it, or it can come through the astral entities themselves. Okay. So that's how energetic attacks come from and where they come from. In actual fact, the Psychic Shield, which was created and is available as a correspondence course on my website, and I'm doing it now as a day-long workshop as well, is designed to protect the unprotected, because some people are naturally protected because of their energy and their personality and their sentience and their evolution as well, and they're background lack of desire to connect with some of these things. So basically they're naturally protected or naturally powerful, whereas others aren't. Okay. So in my perspective, I disregard these entities because they just can't touch me, and I know they can't touch me. I don't let them touch me. Whereas others who are less forthright in their thought processes might have an issue with it and might get connected or attacked in that way. Okay. Next question. I think it's in the AND dialogues on page 4408. So that'll be a Kindle page number. I wrote, the life plan is therefore riddled with interactive contracts between aspects that serve the function of ensuring that the chosen experiences are presented to the incarnate aspect by those other incarnate aspects that are working around it in the same environment as it is, that have agreed to present them. This, of course, is reciprocated. This means that we contract with other aspects while incarnated. Could we revoke part of our contracts? Let's say we married and got the divorce, and the difficulties we faced brought a lot of lessons and experiences. Now we would like to move on. Could we place our intent and announce that by saying, I am a sovereign being, and exercise my intent, and will revoke my contract with X, hence the forthwith? Does that work? And if not, why not? Why our will and intent? Why is our will and intent not enough? The best way to revoke a contract, generally, if something's happened to us, the contract's been fulfilled. If it's continuing, maybe that contract hasn't been fulfilled in totality. But we can move away from, if we feel we've learned enough, we can use our intention to move away from the interaction with another individual. And we can actively terminate it by forgiving that individual and forgetting and sending them love, and then desiring no longer to interact with that individual. And we can do this through meditation or through focused interaction with ourselves, and creating a mantra if you want to do it in that way. And so we can in fact move away from a particular interaction with a particular individual if we feel we no longer need to. So the other thing is, it could be part of our life plan to recognise that we no longer need to interact with this individual, and this point at which we have decided we no longer need to interact with that individual, and we decide to forgive and forget them, could be the point at which we are severing karma or a previous link with them in a previous incarnation. So we have to think of it in these sorts of terms, recognising and understanding that in essence we can, with our intention, change what appears to be a cyclic interaction with an individual in a certain environment, and terminate it as we want to, provided it feels right. And if it feels right, then it should do. Next question, again in the AND dialogues, I feel, in page 4426, you wrote that guides and helpers use the Akashic to validate the optimal junctures of insertion and the intensity of intervention required. How could Akashic records validate for our helpers' assistance with our life plan? Many people say they can read the Akashic records. What do they access? Does Akashic records have history of the aspect, incarnation or more? If more, what are they? Does Akashic records hold the complete blueprint of our life plan when incarnated? Does Akashic records keep records belonging to an aspect of tests separately, or the Akashic records hold test records of all of its aspects in one bundle? How they're categorised, where they're held, whoever sees it. Dolores Cannon discusses this and she said Akashic records are held in a building. Was that metaphoric or simplified for us as incarnate individuals? Can I elaborate? I can elaborate to as much as I can give you the information I know. The Akashic records are simply a memory set within the source that are associated with those individual souls or aspects that incarnate in the human form. So it's a location within the source, and how we interact with that is based upon how we feel we can interact with it. If Dolores wants to use it as a repository of knowledge, like a library, then that's fine. But basically, it's a location where everything that has happened, will happen, could happen, should happen, has happened, may happen, will happen, is happening all concurrently. And so the guide and helpers, because we exist in a condition where everything is happening concurrently, can access this because it's associated specifically with being incarnate in the human state on the earth. There are lots of other records or memory sets or locations within the overall sentience and energy that the source has got that is specifically associated with experiential remembering, so to speak, and the evolutionary content associated with experiential remembering, and everything's happening concurrently within that, because it's all within an event space, which is, if you want to call it holistic, you can. If you want to call it holographic, you can. But it means everything that has happened, is happening, will happen, could happen, should happen, is all in one place at the same time. So the guide and helpers can look at that and say, okay, we can. They even look at the potential parallel conditions as well, by the way. So they can then look at these things associated with a particular individual in the interactions he's having now, and what these interactions were as a function of the Akashic, and say, okay, this is the right time to put this in now. We can change it though. Maybe we can do this instead, or do that instead, or maybe in this particular parallel condition, this particular experience needs to be inserted here rather than there. And so it's all about creating the opportunity for us, who in our individualized state, in a low frequency environment, in a low frequency body, aren't able to see. So it's a bit like understanding the maze and getting to the center of the maze but having to remember it, or only being able to work with that maze, although we potentially understand it and know it anyway, back to front, upside down, left and right, but we forget about it. And we still have to interact with it, and the only way we can interact with that maze and get to the centre of the maze and back out again is by experiencing certain things, like bumping into people within the maze, asking them directions, getting lost, getting found, understanding certain junctions within the maze as well. So it's a case of us trying to understand it and work with it without knowledge of it. So it's a bit like us having to learn to drive a car again, having already previously driven that car and experienced various different experiences in the car. So it's about understanding things, and as categories go, there's just one category as far as I'm aware. It's just experience, and they are sort of categorized in terms of what have I, as an individualized aspect of my true energetic self, experienced in all the different parallel conditions, in all the different pasts, the different presents, the different futures, the different possibilities of those different past, presents and futures. So they will be categorized in terms of us and Earth, and what we've experienced from those particular experiences, and what we've learned from it, and how we've evolved as a result of that, and how that evolution has helped our true energetic self. Okay, so I hope that helps with that particular question. Another question based upon this. So many people say they can read the Akashic records, and there is no way to know if they can read or not. With regression, we could access some information. Abraham Hicks calls regression not accurate. He says when you do regression, you do not necessarily access your own Akashic records, and you could access another entity in your group or other aspects. Is that correct? Absolutely. Basically, there are lots of occasions where we experience something from the Akashic records, and it's like we've experienced it ourselves. It's like we've been there ourselves, but actually we haven't. So in this instance, we can get experience to help us work or navigate through an incarnation based upon another aspect's experience in another existence, in a similar condition, in a similar environment. So we can actually access that which we haven't experienced but is associated with us, because we've downloaded it, so to speak, and we can access other things associated with other aspects as well. So unless we exactly know what we're asking or want, we can put ourselves in a position where we're just accessing things randomly, and Abraham Hicks is absolutely right there. Okay, so the next question is Source Entity 1 said, one way to ride out karma is by everyone forgiving each other at the point of reception of an action. What is this reception of an action? Kindly elaborate. It appears that Source says that there is a reaction for our bad acts towards another entity. There's a positive action as well, of course. And you always say that karma means attraction to low frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions, or stimulus or sensations. So the History of God, Kindle 6613. Karma is extremely complicated, and karma is essentially our addiction to low frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions in the low frequency environments, and the desire and the need to come back to experience it. Karma is also to do with how we interact with others within this environment. And so if we can for instance experience a particular experience, or know we're about to experience a particular experience that we know or feel is going to be detrimental to us, and we forgive the individuals who are administering that experience on us straight away, then we can negate the need for the reciprocation of that experience with that individual, to negate the link between us, the link being karma. So it's about constantly forgiving people as they interact with you. Sometimes they interact with you in a nice way. You don't need to forgive them for a nice way, but if you feel that you've been wrongly done, for instance, or somebody's done something wrong to you, or cheated on you, or hurt you in some way, if you can, at the point of being hurt, forgive them, like Jesus did, by saying, if they punch you in the face, or if they hit you in the cheek, then offer them the other cheek. That's the point of reception of the action. Forgive them to the point where you say, okay, if you want to punch me, punch me. There is no fear associated with that interaction in that way, and there is no connectivity or continued connectivity by being angry at that person and wanting to get them back, for example. Okay, so that's the way in which you can negate karma in that particular respect at the point of reception. Okay. Next question is, you wrote that a child gets protection from energetic attacks by being close to his parents' energetic fields. Yeah, I've just explained that in one of the previous questions. What about kids who end up with no parents shortly after birth, or sent to foster care or orphanage? Who protects them, and how do these children deal with it energetically? How can they be helped? Basically, I think we've asked some of these questions in the previous Satsangas. Maybe I'm going through some older questions as well. I saw a different list of things. Maybe there's a bit of repetition. Doesn't matter. Some of these questions sometimes need to be asked twice, actually. So this is probably why I've got these questions again. Basically, the people who care for them protect them. So if they're abandoned or they're orphaned and they're in a hospital, then the nurses or the midwives who look after them will protect them in that way as well. If they go to an orphanage, for instance, the people who love them, who look after them, and the people who foster them, or the people who adopt them, will also provide that energetic protection for them as well. So they do get protected, or they create their own level of protection very quickly. So even though, from around the year 0 to the 7, their energy fields and their chakras are still sort of developing, they can get protection from other individuals who show them love in some way, shape or form, by being within their energy fields. Children are very good at clinging onto the legs of their parents and the legs of other people who they feel can protect them, if you notice this function with children. And also people who are fostering children or who are adopting children also protect them as well. So they do get it from different places, or they develop an energy system which is protective fairly quickly. Okay. We've gone through a question about naming some inventors with sacred geometry. Okay. And we've gone through one of the other questions here. I don't know if we've gone through this question. In my book, you identified 3 religions and the people who brought it: Jesus, Muhammad and Buddha. I don't mention Moses and Judaism. I don't mention Moses and Judaism because simply because they were developments towards the work that Jesus, Muhammad and the Buddha did. From my understanding, there wasn't really the structure associated with the teachings, although Moses did bring down the Ten Commandments, so to speak, and that was very important, but they didn't really give the continued interactive way in which one can become self-realized and connect back with the Trinity self and source. So that's the reason for that. There was no other reason. They were important at that time in a way of keeping people together and making them think, behave and act in the right way. So whereas Jesus and Muhammad and Buddha provided a direct way of interacting with one's self by perfecting the connectivity through internalization. I feel that, and might be wrong here, but I feel that Moses and Judaism didn't actually do that. They just provided a way in which to experience and keep yourself clean karmically. So, although it's a different angle, it's not as in depth. Okay, so as I said probably before, there's going to be a book on this that explains the links between my understandings and the different start points of religions and other things as well, not just religions, but ways of thinking, ways of being as well, which would include the works of Confucius, etc. Because I think some of these are very important to understand where they've come from and how they integrate with a more deeper level of understanding that's available to us now, not just in my work, but with other people's works around as well, because we're all stepping stones, and those that will come after us who will deepen the understanding as well. Another question here, which I think also we've answered before, but I think I'm going to answer it again. So much is attached to Judaism, religious books, and the hidden meanings to our creation. There are so many books or movies to I Am That I Am, when Moses revealed the response from God, and so many interpretations of what is the proper format for using that phrase. What is my take on this? Yeah, we have gone through this before, but basically, it's a way of saying that if Source said I am that I am, it's basically saying I am Source. And I am existent. I am in existence. I am sentience. I think, therefore I am, is a very good way of saying it as well. And so it's basically some of these books, although they don't give us directions, and this is why Judaism is quite important in terms of how we as individuals can reconnect with Source or reconnect with our Trinitic selves. It does give us an understanding of, in a very, very basic way, that we are sentience and energy, and that which we communicate with as a higher function of sentience and energy is our Trinitic self, is again sentience and energy, and that therefore Source is sentience and energy. It's just that the volume, if you want to call it that, or the density of sentience and energy is much greater as we move up. So from the perspective of the sentience that's generally associated with an incarnate aspect, which is about 2.5% of the sentience of a Trinitic self, then we can see there's a great jump in sentience associated with the Trinitic self in comparison to the aspect. And then if we look at, and I've got no idea what the difference in percentage of sentience a Trinitic self has got in comparison to Source, and therefore of Source between that and origin, you can see there's a massive jump. So it's basically just showing that these things show that we are smaller individualized units of Source, or the sources are smaller individualized units of the origin, and the Alma smaller individualized units of origin, and sometimes the hybrids are smaller individualized units of the mixture of origin energy with the intention for it to be origin versus Source entity energy with its intention to be Source entity. And so there's a lot of these things which are based upon recognizing that we are not the human form, and that which created us is which we are part of, and that which created us is also not quantifiable as being physical or human. And so the am that I am, or I think therefore I am, is an indication that it is the sentience that is what we are, and not the form. Okay. Well, I hope that answers that question. I probably answered it in a slightly different way to last time. So I've actually made a point that these questions have been answered now. So there's a few other questions I'm going to go through next month from FM, which will hopefully clear up that backlog of questions and will allow us to start to be more diverse in terms of the contributors. But fantastic questions all the same. And sometimes these questions do have to come from one person for a period of times, or a number of different satsangas, because there's a theme there. There's a theme not only in terms of the questions and that they're asking, in terms of what they were trying to gaining their own understanding, but there's also a theme that's associated with the people who listen to the Satsanga. So there's two parts to the story there. One is satisfying the individual who's asking the questions. The other one is satisfying in a subconscious way the questions that individuals may also request answers for as well. Okay. This series of questions from JM, and hopefully we can go through these quite quickly because we've started to run out of time, but I shall give them the time that they deserve. First question is that I used to think there were 408 universes in Source Entity 1's multiverse, but since the first 12 floors from the basement of the framework, those being the frequencies, there are 408 minus 12 universes, with 12 floors being the first universe. So the number of universes is, it says 307 here, but it should actually show 397 here. Okay, right. This came from the construction of the source entities in the true energetic self. Okay, so the multiverse is created through 12 full dimensions. Each of the full dimensions operates in the same way apart from the first full dimension. Okay, so the first full dimension operates with the lowest frequencies, so we'll deal with that in a moment. So full dimension 2 up to full dimension 12 operate in the same way. Each of those full dimensions splits out into 3 subdimensional components, and each of those subdimensional components splits out into 12 frequency levels or frequency bands. Each of those frequency levels or frequency bands is capable of supporting and does support a self-contained simultaneous universal environment in its own right. Now, a simultaneous universal environment means it is a static piece of structure. It's not parallelisms created by event space. So it's a static structure which is there. So by simultaneous, it means that their existence all the time and they're unchanged, apart from the parallel conditions. So we have 11 times 3 times 12, which gives us 396 frequencies or frequency levels or frequency bands, and 396 universes. Then we have to deal with the first full dimension, which again houses the lowest frequencies. So although it splits out into 3 subdimensional components, it compresses back into one composite subdimension, which means it only allows 12 frequencies to be created. So there's 12 frequencies there, plus the 396 gives us 408 frequencies. So JM is correct there. However, these 12 frequencies are all required to create a universe because they're so low frequency. So we only have one universe plus 396 universes, which gives us 397 universes, which is correct again. So I consider there was a typo in the original script. So basically we have 408 frequencies, but 397 universes. And the physical universe is unique because it's the one that requires a whole dimension to create it and requires 12 frequencies to create it. Whereas the other universes are the function of one particular frequency within a full dimension. And there are 36 universes within a full dimension from the second full dimension upwards. Okay, so I hope that explains that, which is it was a good question. Thank you very much. Second question: in the true energetic self, the origin. In the not the true energetic self. In the origin speaks. By the way. So the first question came from the origin speaks. Again from the origin speaks. The origin states, "I now know how to stop my own heart beating, and I can say I can stay in this condition for as long as I like ad infinitum." What does this mean? It basically means you can put yourself into stasis. If you are a yogi and you're very well adept at being internalized, you can actually start to turn off the senses, the physical senses. Seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, and smelling. Okay, but on top of that, you can start to do things like turn the heart off or slow the heart right down to the point where it's not necessary. You slow the whole body function down, metabolism down, so the heart can stop. And so the origin is using this as an example of going into stasis. Yogis can go into stasis, put themselves in suspended animation by slowing the body down. They turn off the different senses. They slow the body's metabolism down, which means the heart stops beating because there's no longer a need for the heart to beat to maintain the energies of the body. The body is being maintained by by the energies, not by the physical metabolism. So basically, the origin does this. It can put itself in stasis. It can stop growing. It can stop thinking. It can stop being. It can stop creating. And that's what that means. Basically, it puts itself in stasis. Question 3 is in the Origin Speaks. The Origin refers to the designers of the human form. Who are they? Did they design human forms for many planets of our universe or of our multiverse? There are a number of individuals who are disincarnate, who are part of a, if you want to call them a council, you can do. It's a very popular word these days. But they are involved with the use of and the optimization of the use of various different locations within the physical universe and the higher frequencies within the physical universe for accelerating the evolutionary progression of us, so to speak, of us as true energetic selves and smaller aspects of our true energetic selves. And so they look at a different environment and say, well, what particular vehicle can be used to optimize the opportunity for evolutionary progression or through experience in this particular environment this planet gives us. And so they design different vehicles, and one of those vehicles was the human form. So there's different individuals who look after different planets, different sectors within a galaxy, different sectors within a galaxy within different frequencies as well. And so there's different groups of disincarnate individuals who, and sometimes they have to incarnate to create some of these vehicles, different body types, to allow the incarnate aspect to experience different environments in different ways, interact with different individuals who are incarnate in different environments in different ways, in different frequencies, within different locations, within different parts of this particular galaxy and other galaxies within the physical universe. So basically they design all sorts of different vehicles, and there's different groups of individuals who design different vehicles for the incarnate aspect, or the aspect to attach itself to experience the low frequencies or the frequencies associated with a particular location within a galaxy, within the universe. And they are constantly changing the human form, and the human form has had a number of different iterations. Some of them have been created to compensate for the drop in frequency, and some of those have survived or adapted naturally to the drops in frequency. And so we've got a number of vehicles which are here through Darwinian evolution, number of vehicles which are here through initial design by these entities, and others which have been imported as a result of the need to change a body type that is similar to the human body, to allow the continued interaction with these environments, but without the need to design and develop a completely new body, for instance. Okay. Question 4 in the Origin Speaks. The Origin says that free energy can be manipulated by me when I'm in a period of creativity. Isn't the Origin always creative? No, it can be in contemplation as well. The Origin can be constantly in creativity, contemplation, or experience. It doesn't always need to create. We don't always need to create. Some of our best points of existence are when we're in a contemplative nature. So the Origin doesn't need to constantly create to experience and to evolve and to progress and to change its location and to grow its sentience. It can just contemplate what it's doing. Call it planning if you want to. Call it understanding what it's done if you want to. But it doesn't always need to create to progress. Okay. In the Origin Speaks, you and the Origin are discussing the pivotal role played by event space in the Origin's development. You pose this question: I wonder what else had a role to play in your development? And the answer is many, many more things, but this is not the right time to discuss them. You would need to write a whole new book to even think about scratching the surface. Can we assume that this whole new book will be separate work from Beyond the Origin, since that it already has so much to cover? No, I think this is going to be Beyond the Origin. The books that are going to come, by the way, are... I'm working on a healing book now. Of course, The Curators is about to be published. I've already got the cover for it, which is quite good. We've got to go edit the galley print, and then it will be published. So probably August, September this year, which is 2019. So that's the 7th book. The 8th book I'm working on, which is healing. The 9th and 10th will be based upon the and beyond the origin, and then there's 2. One is to do with so-called antichrists and what their roles are, and the deeper meaning behind that. How big that book will be, I don't know. And one will be about linking religions together as well. But I see the origin I see the Beyond the Origin book being quite a wide-reaching book. I think it's going to be stitching up quite a few unanswered questions from previous dialogues. Okay. Next question, again from the Origin Speaks. Your own creative function is born from being creative with the intention of having the ability to be creative. I understand that God is creative by creating things, but we don't create things in the same way. So in what way are we being creative? We do things in a different way, and that's also being creative. Being creative is not specifically about building a motor car or building a house or writing a book or trimming a bush in a certain way. It's about how we do it differently. So being creative is basically about doing things in a different way. So if we have 10 people together and tell them to build a shed, for instance, those 10 people would build a shed in a different way to each other. Some of them would follow the instructions, some of them wouldn't follow the instructions, some of them would collaborate with somebody else. Some of them would put one thing in first and then something else second, whereas others would do the second thing first. So it's all about how we do things. And how we do things is being creative, because we're creating another way in which it can be done. So even though we don't think things are creative, we are being creative. I hope that answered that particular question. Because even asking this question is being creative. So it's a case of recognising that when we do things differently, we're being creative, because we're creating a different condition from which we are experiencing that which is being experienced in the way it's being experienced. Okay. Next part of this question, and a related question concerns terminating creativity, which the Origin can choose to do. This comes from the same chapter. In what sense can we do that if indeed we can? Our role is to experience things, learn and evolve, and in how we experience, learn and evolve is how we create. When we stop experiencing, learning and evolving, and we stop contemplating and we stop being, then we stop creating. So we only when we would be in a position when we totally reintegrate with Source and lose our individuality would we stop creating. I think that's the best answer to that question. We are naturally creative in myriad different ways, and some of it is not considered to be creative, although it is. It's just that if we stop being individualized, then we would stop as an individual being creative, although we might still be part of the creativity or a creative condition as a part of the Trinity, our Trinitic self or Source, that no longer has individuality, but is still nevertheless part of something bigger that he's still creating. So we would still be part of a creative process, even though we might be in some level and some depth of communion with our Trinitic self, or our Trinitic self is in some depth of communion with Source as well. Okay, and another related question to this is still from the same chapter. Whenever an entity creates something, it creates it in its name, in its image or signature. Do we do that? Are we creative in that sense? Yes, of course. Everything we do is created by our energy, by our intention. We intend to do something. We intend to be something. We intend to experience something. We intend to build something. We intend to disassemble something. The energy associated with that is us. And the sentience associated with that energy is us. And so that there's a signature associated with that which is done, which is attributable to us. So that's what it means by being created in His name. And in some respects, when in the Bible it says that God created us in its image, it basically is saying that it created an individualized version of its own sentience. So it's a smaller version of it. So our true energetic self is a smaller version of God. And we, as individualized aspects of our true energetic selves, are smaller versions of our true energetic selves. So again, we create in our own image that which created us in its image. And by its image, it means it's just sentience and energy, and a purpose to be. And that's what it means by that. Okay. Next question is: astronomers estimate the radius of our universe as 14 billion light years. Is this anywhere near true? We don't have the capability to understand how big the universe is. And actually the universe is slightly amorphous. So to say it's got a radius is probably incorrect. Although I sometimes describe it as a sphere. That's a good example, but it's not clear. Think of it like the weakest balloon you've ever had, and that balloon is full of water. And it just swishes and swashes around. It's changing its shape based upon where it is and where it's laying to rest. That's the best way to think about it. So there's no way in which we can say. The only way we can potentially justify a measurement of the universe is by giving it a volume, so to speak. But if you remember in one of the books, I think it's one of the Beyond the Source books, there was a talk about evolution affecting the size of a particular universe or a particular event space or a continuum. So evolution can affect the size because the universe isn't just height, width, and breadth, so to speak. The basic dimensions that mankind calls a dimension, which is basically a state of measurement, not a dimension per se. We've also got the content within the frequencies within that's volume as well. So if we would suggest that the only way in which the universe can be quantified in terms of a measurement is by its volume, and that volume can be changed based upon the frequency associated with the universe and the content that is within it and the entities within those particular frequencies and their creations within that volume. That's going to give you some way of saying that actually the volume is one thing, but the density is another. so it's unquantifiable basically from a human perspective, because it's based upon the creativity within it, the incarnate aspects within it, the content that's created within it, the content that's naturally there, and the content that's created within it, and the density of the creativity and the density of the content, and the density of the sentience associated with that creativity as well. So I hope that answers that particular question in a way which is totally unquantifiable. Thank you very much. Next question is: the origin says that Source Entity 1 created the multiverse as an environment for structured energetic, in brackets, frequential ascension, and populated with smaller versions of itself, us. That includes the question answerer and me as hopefully the question answerer, or the question asker and the question answerer, giving them the power of creativity as a prerequisite for gaining experience. So we do have the power of creativity, whatever it is. Absolutely. The whole point of it is the multiverse is a playground. It's a playground based upon a separated out or a annexed area of the source entity's structure and its own sentience, and some of that sentience, of course, is us, because the multiverse has a level of sentience as well. And so what we experience within that multiverse and how we create within that multiverse and what we gain from the experience within that multiversal environment is what we use to evolve. And so that level of experience is what we create. We create an experience. If we decide to drive to an airport rather than get a taxi to the airport, we've created a condition where we're experiencing one thing versus another. So we've created a condition of experience through choice. The thing is, if we thought about, actually, we're not going to go to the airport via the taxi, we're going to get a lift from a friend, that's a different experience. And so we've got three different experiences there. One is to go by taxi, one's to drive ourselves there and park our car, and the other one's to get a lift by a friend. And although we singularly experience the one dominant experience because we decide to go with a particular decision point, let's say we take the taxi, another part of us splits off. That we create a localized event space where part of us experiences being taken to the airport via a friend, the other one experiences going to the airport by driving the car and parking it in the car park. So we do create lots of different things in lots of different ways. Okay. And next question is, the Earth is represented in all 12 frequencies associated with the physical universe. So are there 12 Earths, each of which with its own set of inhabitants? Actually, there's 10, because the Earth needs the first 3 frequencies, as we do, to create the gross physical. So this is where we got this misinterpretation with dimensions, 3 dimensions. It's a unit of measurement. Height, width, and breadth is a unit of measurement, not a dimension. So when people say we're going to the 4th dimension, which is time, it's complete nonsense. The 4th dimension is a higher piece of structure, much higher piece of structure, and the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd dimensions are a much higher piece of structure. Mankind should use height, width, and breadth as height, width, and breadth. Okay, so height, width, and breadth is a set of frequencies together, giving solidity or gross physicality, so to speak. So that's one Earth, and then the 4th frequency is another function of that Earth, and the 5th is another function of that Earth, and the 6th another function of that Earth. So it's like getting more and more finitude within it, and it's like having sectors, for instance, on a hard drive, where the hard drive is the total space available to us, so to speak, and the first area or the first use of occupying that space is based upon a certain frequency. Let's say hertz, and if we go into kilohertz, we can put more information in 1,000 hertz than we can do in 1 hertz. And if we go into megahertz, we can put more information in 1 megahertz than we can do in a kilohertz, because there is 1,000 kilohertz to a megahertz. But there's also much more we can put in that megahertz than we can do in 1 hertz. So if you think of it in those sort of terms, where it's about the amount of content that can be represented within a different frequency, and as we experience the first 3 frequencies of the gross physical, we see what's gross physical. We don't see what's represented on the 4th frequency because it's too high a frequency. The eyes can't see it. The gross physical is incapable of interacting with that which is in the 4th frequency. And then there's the 5th frequency, and that which is in the 4th frequency and the 3rd frequency can't interact with that which is on the 5th frequency because it's too high. Although what's on the 4th frequency can interact with that which is in the 4th frequency and the 3rd frequency, and the 5th frequency can interact with that which is in the 4th frequency and the 3rd frequency, plus the 5th frequency itself. So we have the first 3 frequencies create one particular Earth-based condition, and then we have the 4th frequency which creates the Earth-based condition in the first 3 plus the 4th, which is a second Earth, if you want to call it that. And then the 5th frequency is what's in the 3rd frequency, 4th frequency, and the 5th frequency, which is the 3rd version of the Earth, if you want to call it that. So at the higher up the frequencies they go, we see more content, whilst continuing to see the previous content and the previous frequencies. So that's what I mean by it's representative on these different levels. And the inhabitants are there at a higher frequency. And so lots of different entities of different frequencies who want to interact with the Earth can interact with the Earth. Doesn't mean to say it's got a different set of occupants, so to speak. It just means basically that they are interacting with the Earth on that particular level, and they can be human beings, for instance, of a different era who've accelerated their own evolutionary process and gained a higher level for their particular body types. Okay. Last but one question. Shards die when the human aspect body dies. So would several of them die instantly if the spawning human we are to die unexpectedly? Right. Let's just say this again. Shards die when the human aspect's body dies. Right. The incarnate aspect can produce 12 different shards, which are smaller versions of the aspect, a bit like the aspect is a smaller version of the trinedatic self. But when the trinedatic self, when the aspect decides to terminate its incarnation, then the shards that it's created also terminate as well. And arguably, the aspect would like to stay in incarnation until the different shards have finished their particular lives. But in general, when an aspect finishes its incarnation, the shards that it's created also finish their incarnation. And it's, even though there's lots of distance, so to speak, in between these different shards, these smaller souls with smaller levels of sentience associated with them. One could be in one country, one could be in another country, one could be even a different location within the physical universe. They would all die together, so to speak, or should I say, the sentient energy associated with that particular incarnation would therefore return back to that particular incarnation that is the aspect itself. So, in essence, if the aspect dies, or the aspect in its incarnation returns back to the Trinetic Self, then those shards that it's projected would also return back to the aspect before it returned back to the Trinetic Self. Although shards that are incarnate can finish their incarnation, return back to the aspect before its incarnation is finished. So that's what can happen there. So basically, there's a logical progression where the shards need to finish their incarnation before they can and do terminate their incarnation and return back to the aspect before the aspect goes back to the Trinetic Self. But if the aspect decides to return back to the Trinetic Self before the incarnations that the shards have finished, then they will finish. They will terminate on the spot, return back to the aspect, and the aspect can then go back to the Trinetic Self. So it's a bit cruel, so to speak, but that's the way it works, unfortunately. The aspect is much more powerful than the shard in that respect. And finally, later on in the Origin Speaks, the Origin says that when the source entities moved so as to observe your communication with the Origin, they brought their work with them and their locations where they were taken over by surrounding energies. Like when a submarine passes through the ocean, how did those energies get there? Do they just exist everywhere? Even where the Origin has never been, what if anything created them? Let me read this again. Later on in the Origin Speaks, the Origin says that when the source entities moved so as to observe my communication, that's me, with the Origin, they brought their work with them and the locations. Oh, basically, yeah. What that means is the aspect of the Origin that they're occupying, that their sentience is occupying, and that they're experiencing, learning and evolving through, was brought with them, basically because it's within that, for want of a better word, sphere of sentient energy that is occupied by the sentience of a particular source entity. So all that was part of the Origin was moved to observe me, so to speak, communicating with an aspect of Origin. And so basically that area that they're occupying that's moved is then backfilled by other aspects of Origin energy and latent sentience, or no sentience at all. So it's a bit like a submarine passes through the ocean. It's like a submarine being, like, for instance, representing the density of sentience, moves through an environment which isn't as dense because it's got no sentience, for instance. It then moves through it, and that lower level of sentience moves out of the way as the submarine moves through it. So the water moves out of the way of the submarine because the submarine is more dense. Okay, it's a lower frequency. It's solid, whereas the water isn't. And it's the same way. The energy that was within the Origin isn't occupied by sentience, and so that which is occupied by sentience is denser, so to speak, and then moves through the sentience. And the other energies that the Origin move around it, so to speak, just like the water moves around the submarine. So that's right. So it's just moving through that which is Origin, but hasn't been assigned sentience yet, and that energy just moves around that energy which has got sentience associated with it, because it's denser, so to speak. If that makes any sense. Okay, that's a good question, that is, and I didn't, and sorry to read it twice, but I understand it now. It makes much more sense, and that's the way it is. That which has got sentience moves through that which doesn't have sentience, and that which doesn't have sentience has to move around that which does have sentience. Good. Like a ball bearing being dropped through water. Okay, well, that's the end of the questions. Thank you very much. There's a lot of questions there, and I'm really grateful for the questions. And now we're going to go to the last part, which is a short meditation on, in effect, where are we? Raising the frequencies of our local environment. So let's just sit down quietly, back straight in our straight backed chair, feet flat on the ground, palms uppermost on our upper thighs where the legs meet the lower body, and eyes closed, focused on the areas of the third eye. So, again, just giving you a moment to quieten down. Your closed eye vision is focused on the area of the third eye, of course. And just see yourself for a moment as being in an area that is a lower frequency than yourself. And that's probably quite true. See yourself as being in an area where the frequencies are around the third level, the third frequency level. The human form occupies 10 frequencies, 7 of which are used and manipulated by the chakras and ourselves, of course, as we animate and move our way through the environment. So just consider this. You can use your mentally spoken words rather than visualizing, that you're opening all of your chakras. Okay, you can extend down towards the ground and rotate clockwise. Clockwise is like you're seeing the second hand on a clock on the floor between your 2 feet, rotating from the number 12 to the number 3 to the number 6 to the number 9 and back to the number 12 again. That extends the basal root chakra. Then consider the chakras as like little cones, lots of little smaller cones or vortices of energy inside them. The higher the chakra, the more little cones there are inside them to cope with more higher, denser frequencies. Extend the sacral chakra, which is the basal root chakra, by the way, is point of origin where the two legs meet the lower body in the area of the groin. Now we'll extend the sacral chakra from its point of origin 3 inches or 7.5 centimeters below the navel. Extend it out. Just use your mentally spoken word to extend that chakra and rotate it clockwise. Again, you don't need to worry about the back chakras of the sacral, solar, heart, throat or spiritual third eye, because whatever we do with the front chakras, the rear chakras do it automatically, because the front chakras psycho-spiritually are our intention, the rear chakras psycho-spiritually are our action. Okay, so it's extend, or use a mentally spoken word by saying I extend the front aspect, or I extend my sacral chakras and rotate them clockwise. This will bring you to the second level. Let's do the same thing with the solar chakra, which is 3 inches or 7.5 centimeters above the navel. Use your mentally spoken words, or if you prefer, your visualization to extend that chakra and rotate it clockwise. That brings you to the third level. Fourth level. Okay, can be achieved by extending and rotating clockwise. The heart chakra, whose point of origin is at the center of the front of the chest, in the center of the sternum. This brings to the fourth level. And the area around us, by the way, is also starting to be affected by our higher frequencies. Let's go to the fifth level then, the throat chakra. Its point of origin is the center of the front of the neck. We extend that by using our visualization or our mentally spoken word to achieve the same thing. Rotate that clockwise, and we go to the fifth level. Okay, feel yourself getting lighter and lighter. Again, you might be hearing tinnitus or tingling in the hands or body, or temperature changes, or hearing tinnitus ringing in the ears. Okay, let's go to the sixth level then now by extending and rotating the spiritual or third eye chakra from its point of origin, the center of the front of the forehead, in between the two eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose, in exactly the same place as the spiritual or third eye, just at a different frequency level. Remember, things can exist in the same space at the same time without being the same thing. This brings us to the sixth level. Now we can go to the seventh level by extending the crown chakra from this point of origin, from the center at the top of the head up towards the ceiling, and rotate that clockwise as well. So we're now operating on the seventh frequency. Now, to extend the energies or the frequencies of ourselves into the local environment, just visualize yourself growing roots down from the feet and spreading out rapidly from the room that you're in. These are energy roots, or frequential roots, shall we say. And as you spread your frequential roots, the frequency of the environment that they touch starts to go to the seventh level. So spread your frequential roots out from your feet into the room that you're in, and then from the room into the house that you're in, and then from the house to the land that the house is in, the gardens front and rear, if you're a detached house, and the sides as well. Now extend them into the streets or the suburb that your house is in. And now extend them into the areas beyond the suburb, into the general catchment area of the city that you're in. Let's leave it at that. So you're increasing the frequency of the room that you're in, the house that you're in, the land that your gardens, the land that is your gardens that your house is in, the roads that your house is in, the suburb that the roads are in, and the city that the suburb is in. As you spread these frequential roots, the area that is touched by these roots moves up from being the 3rd frequency level to being to the 7th frequency level, because that's what you've left yourself at. So you're basically like a tree with energy roots or frequency roots that are within the house itself, the land the house is in, the street the house is lands in, the suburb the streets are in, and the city that the suburb is associated with. All your frequential roots connect all these areas together and lift their frequencies to the 7th level. You've effectively lifted your city and all the other suburbs and all the other houses and the rooms within those houses and the people within the rooms to the 7th level, the same as you. Notice how it feels like you're not an individual, you're part of something bigger. We'll just stay here a moment. Just feel this higher frequential environment and your connection, your connectivity to it, and the fact that you've created it. When you go out of your house later today or your office later today, just see how people have changed. See how happier they look, how more content they look, how more calmer they are, how more satisfied they feel. You've now created this higher frequency environment. You need to detach yourself from it to maintain your own energies. So just visualize or use your mentally spoken words that the connection between your feet and these energetic roots have a switch, like an electric switch, an isolator switch. So if you turn the switch off, it doesn't stop the high frequencies that you've created in this different environment around you, this city-based environment around you. It doesn't make them leak away. It just keeps them as they are. But what it does is it disconnects you from them so you can operate as an individual again. So this isolation switch is now on. Just turn it off. It isolates you from this high frequency environment you've created. You don't lose your own high frequencies, you're just separate now, and it maintains the high frequencies in the room, in the house, in the garden, in the streets, in the suburb, in the city that you are currently within. It's like tying the knot in a balloon. The higher frequencies within the balloon keeps the balloon inflated. Tying the knot isolates that higher frequency, keeping it within the balloon. And now for yourself, you can move your chakras back to their normal positions. They're normally operating on a tick over condition. Extending and rotating them allows you to bring more energy in. So just ask or use your mentally spoken word for your crown chakra to stop rotating and contract back into its point of origin at the centre of the top of the head. This brings you down to the 6th level. Again, you can visualise if you wish, or just continue to use your mentally spoken word to stop the rotation of the 6th, the spiritual or third eye chakra, and contract it back into its point of origin at the centre of the front of the head. This brings you down to the 5th level. To come down to the 4th level, we use our mentally spoken word or visualisation to stop the 5th or throat chakra from rotating and contract it back into its point of origin at the centre of the front of the neck. To go down to the 3rd level, again we visualise or use our mentally spoken word to stop the rotation of the heart chakra and contract it back into its point of origin, the centre of the front of the sternum, the centre of the front of the body. And now we can go down to the 2nd level by again repeating the process of visualising or using our mentally spoken word to stop the rotation of the sacral chakra and allowing it to contract back into its point of origin 3 inches or 7.5 centimetres above the navel. This brings us to the 2nd level. On the 2nd level we can come down to the 1st level by visualising or using our mentally spoken words to stop the rotation of the sacral chakra and contracting it back into its point of origin 3 inches or 7.5 centimetres below the navel. This brings us to the 1st level. And then we can come down to the basic neutral function of the earth level, as I call it, by using our visualization or mentally spoken word to stop the rotation of the base or root chakra and contract it back into its point of origin, which is where the 2 legs meet the lower body in the area of the groin. And so you can slowly come back into the room, slowly open your eyes, and if you have any water, feel free to drink some water to help ground you. And just notice how the environment still feels high frequency. The environment around you, your room, your house, your garden, the streets, the suburb and the city are still a higher frequency. You've done a wonderful service to those around you and of course yourself. Okay, so that's the end of this particular Satsanga on the 25th of May 2019 broadcast from Tokyo in Japan. Thank you very much for listening, thank you very much for participating, and thank you very much for your questions. I have enough questions for the June Satsanga, and after that I'll be looking for questions for July. If any questions do come in June, I'll try to incorporate them into the Satsanga, of course. That's not a problem, and it just makes it a little bit longer and hopefully a little bit more interesting. So thank you again, namaste to you all, God's love to you all, and blessings to you all, and I look forward to working with you all energetically or physically sometimes in another event space. Namaste to you all, and goodbye, and look forward to seeing you and feeling you all in the next Satsanga in June. Did you see the aliens in Crete?